Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have our usual roundup of stories affecting the Sikh community, and we have the latest from Chandigarh as the university protest steps up a pace. Meanwhile, as the fear of hate crime against Sikhs rises across the diaspora here in the UK, a recent initiative has been launched to help keep members, particularly women, safe. We'll have more details on that in a moment. And finally, the independent global organisation that monitors authoritarianism around the world has just released its latest report, and unsurprisingly, it's not great news for India. But all this and more on today's show. But joining me, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. For those of you in London's neck of the woods, in Angus's neck of the woods, or in mine, it's been a soggy weekend, but we made it through. So here we are, looking to sit down, cuddle up with a good book, or if you are looking for something better to read, check out our comment section. Of course, everybody's been sharing some great comments. We love those. We'll have some at the end of the show, as always, so stick around for that. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed, and James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world in today's show. And of course, as usual, we'll take a look at loads of great comments at the end of the show, so do stay tuned for that. Right, James, loads to get through this morning. As always, what are you going to start us off with today?
It was a deadly weekend in the Kashmir region at a local police station. They were storing some explosives that they'd confiscated last week. The problem is that they had a group of inspectors in there. They had forensics teams, chemical teams, photographers for identification and logging evidence. Unfortunately, as they were going through this, and apparently from what has been released so far, they were taking samples for a laboratory analysis of the actual explosives. At that time, it caused somehow for the explosives to ignite. This killed 9 people in the police station. There were subsequent smaller explosions that prevented those individuals from escaping or for other officers to get in to rescue them. Throughout the various explosions that took place, it also took such a blast radius in totality that cars outside the police station also caught fire and exploded, and some of the body parts of individuals that were in the police station ended up over 100 meters away through people's windows into their homes. Just a horrific incident that took place. They are being very clear that this is not in any way considered a terrorist attack or any type of intentional explosion. It appears that it was just that, an accident. We'll take a quick peek at a video here of one of the reports coming in from DW News here, and it will show a bit of the scene on the streets there.
People have been killed and more than 30 injured in a blast at a police station in Indian-administered Kashmir. They say the detonation happened in the city of Srinagar. Police and forensics teams were handling confiscated explosives when the material accidentally blew up. It came just days after 13 people were killed in a blast in New Delhi.
This is the aftermath of the blast that ripped through a police station in Indian-controlled Kashmir. It happened late on Friday night when a team of forensic experts was examining a cache of confiscated explosives. Local media reports say small successive detonations prevented the emergency services from accessing the scene, where 9 people were killed and over 30 others injured. Police say they do not expect foul play.
Due to the unstable and sensitive nature of the recovery, the sampling process, the handling was being done with extreme caution, with utmost caution by the FSL team. However, unfortunately, during this course, last night around 11:20 p.m., an accidental explosion has taken place. Any other speculation into the cause of this incident is unnecessary.
Speaking on Saturday morning, locals described the moment of the explosion.
It was around 11:30 p.m. when we heard the blast. It was a high-intensity explosion. We got very scared. We didn't know what had happened. There was a lot of fear. There was a loud blast and we thought there was an air attack. But when we went to the location, we found out it was an explosion. A lot of people were injured and some died as well.
The bodies of those killed are still being identified, and there remains a high security presence as an investigation into the accident takes place.
New Delhi's Bureau Chief Sandra Petersman is following that story. Hello, Sandra. Can you tell us more about how the deadly blast happened?
Well, from all that we hear from security officials in Srinagar, which is the main city in the Indian part of the divided Kashmir region, it is indeed a tragic accident. At the time of the explosion, past 11 p.m. late last night, at the police station, there was some handling of explosives. It was done by policemen and bomb disposal experts. They were handling the explosives for sampling, and during this forensic sampling procedure, something must have triggered this massive explosion that ripped through the police station, killing at least 9, but injuring many more, and the death toll is likely to rise. The explosion was massive by all that we hear and can see on social media footage, for instance, tearing bodies apart, tearing houses apart, sending gushing flames through that police station, and a lot of...
So as you can see there, it was just a horrific scene, but a very tragic accident. One of the individuals who has been reported as a civilian who has died in the explosion was actually a tailor. And police had picked him up and brought him to the police station, but his family and everybody didn't know why they had done that. It turns out reports were that they actually needed him to sew some bags that would actually encase the explosives or to put the explosives in. And unfortunately, as he was doing this work for the police, he became one of the victims there. I don't know if he is one of the deceased victims or one of the 30 that were injured in the blast. But again, as the reporters were saying, there is a potential for the death toll to rise over the 9 that are at count now, because many are in critical condition. Once again, the government is reaching out to various levels, from the Attorney General and other representatives, to contact the local community. They are obviously very much a part of finding out the answers as to how this could have happened, but also on how they are going to rebuild that community after such a major incident, Angus. It was just horrific to hear about all the way around. Now, as we shift gears to a point, of course, still looking at tragedy, we are with the ongoing theme this month, of course, of the genocides of 1984. As November is such an important month in remembering the many victims and the shaheeds of the incidents that took place during that genocide and during the incidents that led up to it through the end of October of 1984, we are sharing some information with you, and we've been looking at different documentaries that I feel are very well done, because they not only are done in Punjabi, but they are also translated into English, so that people like myself, like Angus, and others in the Western world who may not know a lot of the details. Angus and myself have been researching this for several years now, so we are much further ahead than most when it comes to this. But for the audience here, we wanted to play a couple of clips from these videos throughout the week, so that if you grew up in the Western countries, in the UK and Canada, in the US, and maybe you haven't heard a lot of these stories, maybe your family was there but traumatized and didn't really speak a lot about the horrific events, we thought that it was important to remember those tragedies and why it is so important that Sikhs are given the opportunity to have a sovereign Sikh homeland known as Khalistan. So let's take a look at one of these documentaries that are now posted up here.
Nilpreet Kaur was a college student in 1984, studying at Delhi's Venkateshwar College. The mob attacked her home in Palam Colony, and she watched in horror as her father was burnt alive. Her own neighbors, people she had known and trusted, joined in aiding the killers.
Balwan Koko was sitting in my house and he said, सरदार जी आप क्यों टेंशन ले रहे हो, इस कॉलोनी का बाल भी बांका नहीं होगा, अगर जरूरत पड़ेगी तो हम प्रोटेक्शन ले लेंगे. सज्जन कुमार मेरा मामा, that time we knew first time कि ये सज्जन कुमार का भांजा.
He tried again and again to save her father.
अभी मौत थोड़ी दूरी गया था और मैंने कहा डैडी दौड़ो, मौत दूर चले गया. तो मेरे फादर ने अपनी जो आग बुझाने के लिए साथ में सीवरेज पड़ा था, नाला खुदा होगा, मेरे फादर साहब ने नाले में छलांग लगा. मॉब में से किसी ने देख लिया. कैप्टन भागमल सिंह, he was that time on duty, नेवी था. उसने मेरे फादर को रस्सियों से बांधा पोल के साथ. टेलीफोन पोल था वो पास में धनराज की शॉप के पास. और सेकंड टाइम कैरोसिन ऑयल गिवन राजकुमार वाइफ मिसेस दुबादी, और वो हमारे घर आती जाती थी. और मैंने उसको बोला आंटी आंटी नहा दो, एक ही कर रहे हो. उसने मेरी तरफ नहीं देखा. कहती एस जनरल इतना ही होना चाहिए, ऐसे को बहुत पैसा. और मेरे डैडी को दोबारा आती था. मेरे फादर तब तक इतने जल चुके थे और मैं बेबस थी. तब बलवान को कर ले सर्दी से मेरे फादर को मारा. मेरे फादर के तब नाक और मुंह से खून की धारें निकलनी शुरू हो गई और वो गिरते थे. मैं जब वहां से हम निकले तो रास्ते में फादर की डेड बॉडी थी, तब तक जल चुकी थी, इतनी रह गई थी. मैं ना किसी को, मैंने अपने ब्रदर को मैंने बताया कि ये डैडी, और मैंने देखा मैं बस ना मैं रो सकती थी ना मैं कुछ. हम एयरफोर्स स्टेशन आ गए.
With the help of some Air Force officers, Nilpreet managed to rescue several families from Palm Colony. It was during one of their trips to the colony that she saw former MP Sajjan Kumar standing before the mob, inciting them to violence.
एक भी सरदार बचना नहीं चाहिए. जो हिंदू सरदारों को छुपा रहे हैं उनके घरों को भी आग लगाएं.
Nilpreet's relentless determination to seek justice and name the perpetrators made her a target, leading to multiple attacks. Fearing for her safety, her family eventually sent her to college in Jalandhar.
जहाँ पर मुझे गुस्सा आया मैंने फेडरेशन ज्वाइन करी, ऑल इंडिया सिख स्टूडेंट फेडरेशन. ये जो कार्पेट्स थे मैंने उनकी रैकी की हुई थी कि भी मैंने उनको मारना ही मारना. तो 86 में आई हैव डन मैरिज with one of KSSF person whose name was Roshan Al-Baraki, alias Gurdev Singh. तो जेल में जाना पड़ेगा, मेरे को ये दिमाग में ये नहीं चीजें थी, बस ये तो बदला लेना था. और उस वक्त मुझे ये था कि उसके बाद में मेरी स्मूथ लाइफ हो गई.
So as you can see, I mean, the horrific events that took place in 1984 cannot even be described as to what they truly were, and they were just barbaric. This lady was just a young lady at the time, ready for college, and she literally watched them burn her father. Her neighbor, who had been in her home, who had had meals with them, actually supplied the mob with the kerosene to burn her father alive on that pole. What they did was so horrific that when there's a new generation that may not know all of these horrific details and how barbaric and tragic it was, and this, you can see the pain in her eyes. She had to prevent her brother from seeing the father after that just horrific attack and what happened to him, and tried to just keep him away from that and give him some kind of a buffer so that he wasn't as deeply scarred as she was. But given even what she went through and what she had to protect her brother from, she still was instrumental in rescuing others from the community. So it shows that even in the worst tragic situations that you put her in, or others, that they still look for ways to be a positive part of the outcome. And that was her rescuing others, putting her own life on the line. As you heard in the story, that there were attacks and threats against her ongoing after that, because she spoke out and she identified the perpetrators of that disgusting, lynch mob that took the life of her father. Now, as this goes, though, you can see the pain in her eyes, in her face, and in her voice. You can hear it. And that is why there's a lot of stories that haven't been told. There's a lot of stories that haven't been made public or even shared within the intergenerational aspects of a family, because they are still so fresh and so deep that a lot of people just cannot speak about it. And that's why this history is being lost, and why it is getting more and more unlikely that more people will be held accountable for their murders, for their treatment. You saw that they even were under orders that if any Hindus were caught hiding Sikhs in their homes, that those homes were to be burnt down as well. And it was a lot to do with the Hindus who did do that. They did hide the Sikhs. They risked their own lives, their homes, their safety, and everything that they had in order to help others, because they knew that what the government, what law enforcement officers were inciting, and this whole genocide, how wrong it was. And yet we still have politicians, law enforcement, and international communities that fail to recognize this as it was a pure and outright genocide of the Sikh people. And they still have not held many people to account in the criminal justice system. And as I said, it's looking less and less likely that that will happen as the years go by. Less of those individuals are still around to be held accountable for their horrific actions in inciting and leading the way to take the lives of thousands upon thousands of Sikhs. And let that be just another reason why there needs to be the homeland of Khalistan formed, and the Sikhs need sovereignty to be able to decide their own destiny, their own future, and to be able to start moving past and healing from the tragedies of the past, Angus.
Yeah, it's just horrific, and the word that you've used and I will use it also is horrific. And we mustn't forget to try and put this into sort of context. Is this these events happened in our lifetimes, in many of our lifetimes? This isn't something from like the early 20th century, even the 19th century, as you'd expect something so on such an enormous scale of murder and massacre. This actually happened 41 years ago. So there are so many people alive today in the Punjab and across diaspora who have genuine living memories of witnessing these events. And these events, again, they just go beyond comprehension in any civilized society. And there are thousands upon thousands of stories like this. I mean, and it's so imperative upon people like us, James, to try and keep these the memories alive and try and remind the world and, of course, the next generations about what happened in recent history in India, in the Punjab particularly. Because it is these reasons that it's this knowledge that feeds the machinery of justice. It is this knowledge that needs to be kept alive to try and get somehow some form of justice, and those who were involved in this try and get them to at least dragged in front of a court of law. Sadly, I think as the years pass, it's becoming less and less likely. We've witnessed the farcical approaches and the farcical process of Indian law, and particularly, Indian law, even in its best its best processes is slow and ponderous. But when in particular it's then combined with a political agenda where, of course, the Indian state are doing its absolute level best to protect the guilty and to ensure that whenever finally anybody who is guilty of crimes of these genocides is brought in front of a court of law, is that they evade justice as much as possible. And of course, every year that they delay and slow down the process, the guilty end up just dying naturally anyway. They evade justice. So this whole story is just wraps up just the tragedy of the Punjab. And again, as you rightly say, James, why in fact the only reality, the only chance of getting real justice for this is the establishment of Khalistan, because ultimately there is going to be, the guilty are never going to face the sentences that they are due. Frankly, most of them are due the death penalty, in my opinion, for the horrific crimes that they perpetrated. But they're going to evade it. So Khalistan really is the only solution to this. That ultimately, the Sikh community is only ever going to be safe in the future by having their own homeland. And again, I just find it deeply tragic that there are so many people still alive today who have suffered so horrendous. And it always reminds me, we're always quick to jump to the 1930s Germany when we look for examples, but never more has it been more appropriate to compare the events of November 1984 to what happened in the 1930s, the pogroms against the Jews, when ordinary, decent, civilized German people, from ordinary people who've been living side by side with Jews, were whipped up by propaganda, were whipped up and manipulated so frighteningly easily into turning on their fellow human beings and committing the most atrocious acts. But even 1930s Germany actually, ironically, pales into comparison to what actually happened in November 1984. Because, the gas chambers and the Holocaust would just go beyond comprehension. But ordinary citizens, they attacked the shops and everything, but they didn't actually perpetrate the sort of crimes that were witnessed in the Punjab in 1984, where literally families were dragged out of their homes, they were set alight, they were tortured, even children were set alight and murdered. Women were gang raped by marauding mobs of Hindus. So again, as this lady says, people that they'd sat down for dinner with turned on them and perpetrated these enormous crimes. It just defies comprehension. But once again, it's a lesson to our societies of how easy it is to manipulate people. And you only need to look back a few years on the COVID example. There's a prime example of this. And it astonished me how easily it was to persuade vast swathes of our society, just pour enough propaganda and get them to behave in a certain way. And that is exactly what happened in 1984, where the Congress government particularly, and Congress politicians went out there, manipulated Hindu mobs into murdering and acting like animals. That's an insult to animals. Acting just inhumanely, undertaking these acts that we just find unimaginable. But they were capable of doing it. That was clearly inherently in them. And you still have to credit the very brave Hindu families. And this is why we're not anti-Hindu. This is not a Hindu affair, really. But many Hindus, literally at the risk of their own lives, went out of their own way to try and protect Sikh families. They offered sanctuary and refuge for Sikh families fleeing the mobs. And so many Hindus did actually risk their own lives opening up their homes to try and harbour and shelter fleeing Sikhs. So you've got to give them credit for the courage for doing that. But yes, James, as I said, it's absolutely imperative that this memory is kept alive. And don't forget that the narrative that India keeps perpetrating about the Khalistan movement, about the militant movement, as they call it, of the 1980s and 1990s, don't forget, as was highlighted in this short film, that backlash, that rising up of Sikh youth and Sikh gentlemen against the Indian state was in a reaction. It was a defensive measure against this, because of course they witnessed mobs of Hindus, mobs of Indians turning on their community, gang raping their women, murdering their children, setting fire to their fathers and their men. So what would you do? What would any other normal human being do if your small community, if your minority community was attacked like that? Of course you're going to get angry and rise up and try and stop it. And that is what then led to the movements like the KLF, etc., in the 1980s and 1990s. It was a self-defensive measure. It was to try and stop their community being targeted by genocides. But what resulted in the 1980s, 1990s was once again the Indian state just taking these young men out of the countryside and murdering them and then disappearing them. Yet, according to the Indian narrative, it was all about terrorism. It was militancy, etc. But they always they cherry pick that fact about but they always leave out the fact. Well, why were these young men out there trying to resist? What were they resisting against? That's the bit the Indian narrative always leaves out. They tend to forget the genocide that the Indian state perpetrated against innocent men, women, and children. It's an absolute shame. It's an embarrassment for the nation, James.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, if your nation is treating you well, if your government is treating you fairly, if your government is providing an equal opportunity for everyone that resides within its borders, there's no reason for resistance. There's no reasons for militancy. There's no reasons for any of this. And like you said, Angus, that's a perfect point, is that, why were they rising up? Well, it had to do with these the genocide and other acts of violence that were going on. And, years later, the mass graves that were uncovered. It's not something that we can turn our heads to. It's not something that we can pretend didn't happen. It's not something that we should ever allow society to forget or to not be aware of. And that's why it's so important, Angus, for us to continue the work that we do, especially to raise this issue in the month of November and at other points throughout the year. So we'll have links on our Substack for that full documentary if you're interested, and we'll have other documentary links there as well. On True Crime and Justice TV, there is a whole section on historic genocides ranging from the Jews and Syria and Rwanda and, in Germany, everything. So, and now included in those what are called genocides and human rights atrocities, there are videos about the genocide in India. So it's just another way for us, a small part, to try to reiterate to the general public and those who are just learning about it that it was a genocide, not to listen to people when they call it a riot, because it was far from it. It was pure, unfettered genocide, and that's exactly what it was, Angus.
And this is why we keep reiterating the point. The only solution, the only way the Sikh community is going to be safe from the Indian state, because India never changes, is Khalistan. And that's why we will keep campaigning for Khalistan, because clearly India is never going to offer genuine justice for the events of 1984. So the only compensation, really, the only sanctuary that can be provided for the Sikh community is Khalistan. So anyway, but talking of which, James, I want to now talk about India. Because it's very timely that Freedom House, which is an organisation, an independent organisation, which monitors the countries of the world in terms of the levels of the freedom that their people enjoy or otherwise. And every year they produce a report, the Freedom House report, and they analyse 208 countries, 208 territories worldwide. And they assess, they monitor and take a look at the state of society and the governance in those countries, and they produce a league table, let's call it in simple terms. So I'm going to show you the latest update from Freedom House, 2025 Freedom House report. And as I said, they monitor just about every country in the world, and they come up with a score to try and assess the freedom, the levels of freedom enjoyed by the population of each country. And if you look at the map, you can take a quick snapshot here, and much of it is actually very much predictable. The free ones, if you can see the green ones, the free ones, there we go. Countries like the United Kingdom, how do we score? 92 out of 100, a pretty decent score there. Let's see how you do, James. Canada, there we go, 97 out of 100. Well done, Canada. And in fact, I will tell you that Canada scores actually about the highest on the planet. So there you go. If you want to really live a free society, move to Canada. The US scores an 84, a pretty respectable 84, etc., etc. Now, and then, of course, we go to the other end of the scale. Again, pretty. There's no real surprises here. Of course, we have Russia scoring 12 out of 100. How does China do? 9. Oh dear me, etc., etc. So again, there's no surprises on that one. And again, we're talking about no surprises. Well, partly free, of course. We're looking at India here. Sadly, lucky for India, it doesn't fall into the not free, only by virtue of the fact that India still is technically a democracy. India actually did inherit the benefits of being a former British colony. Now, despite all the negative perspectives you can say about colonialism, at least one thing colonialism did to India is it gifted India a very powerful infrastructure, very solid social infrastructure, a legal system, etc. And of course, it then in 1947 became the world's largest democracy, as it likes to claim itself. And yet, let's have a look at India's score. It's 63 out of 100. It's not great, really. And we can dig a bit deeper into this. See more on India. Here we go. So 63 out of 100 in terms of its global freedom. And in its internet freedom, 51 out of 100. And again, it does dig deeper. And I'm not going to get into too much detail here. You can, of course, go on the Freedom House website to find more about it. But ultimately, just to pick out the key highlights, the political rights, 31 out of 40. Now, India, as I said, does have a functioning political system. It is, at least on the face of it, a democratic system. It does have a functioning democracy. It does have elections every 4 or 5 years. It has a relative freedom in terms of political parties. Now, there are flaws in the system, which have highlighted in recent podcasts, actually, how the Dalits and scheduled castes and scheduled tribes were actually trapped by the Pune Pact signed in the 1930s, which basically limited the number of seats that the minorities could ever have. And ironically, the majority lower caste, the lower caste of India, is demographically by far the massively largest volume, the number of people, the largest population in India is the lower caste. And yet, under the Pune Pact, they are restricted to only 100 and something seats out of 570 seats. So only 20-something% of the Indian Parliament can ever represent the vast majority of the Indian population. And likewise, it also means that the majority of the Indian population, even if they voted for one single party, they could never actually control India. It was written, in other words, the democratic system of India was designed by the Brahmin, the upper caste elite, and the constitution was written effectively by the upper caste elite, the Brahmins, that top caste of Indian society, to ensure that they maintain forevermore political and social control of India. Sad but true, and it's reflected to some degree in this relatively low score, 31 out of 40 of political rights. If you look at Canada, USA, most Western European countries, Australia, etc., New Zealand, they have scored much closer to 40 out of 40 on those. Civil liberties, I mean, again, 32 out of 60, that's less than half, 50% nearly. It's atrocious. That's an atrocious score. And the blame is very clearly laid at the part of Narendra Modi. If you read on the website, it goes to great lengths to talk about it's the BJP, Narendra Modi's government, who are basically behind this. And when you look at the internet, one of the most crucial elements, crucial infrastructure of our society, again, it scores 51 out of 100. And we do know, anytime there's any trouble in India, whether it's in J&K, whether it's over in Manipur, or indeed across the Punjab, anytime there's any sort of social uprising, any social resistance to state control and state oppression, the first thing that happens is the internet gets shut down. It's a typical tactic that happens on a regular basis in India. So likewise, this score about internet freedom is limited. Websites are closed down on a regular basis. If you set up a website in India that holds the government to account and the government doesn't like you, they'll just close you down. They close your website down. We see this regularly in J&K and across various other parts of India. Limits on content, a very key one there. Of course, you can only put up certain content in India before your website gets taken down. Violations of user rights, 17 out of 40. Again, it's just, and actually the report talks mainly about the Muslim. It is the Muslim population that actually falls most foul of this. But of course, by Muslims, you can of course read any other minorities, whether you're a Christian, a Jain, or indeed, of course, a Sikh, is that you experience firsthand this state oppression, this state control, which is reflected in the Freedom Freedom House report. So there you go, James. As I say, if you're in the audience, do go have a look at Freedom House's website, and there you'll actually see just how bad things are in India. And again, this is the nation that is trying to claim itself as the world's largest democracy. I'm chuckling because it just sits so risibly and uncomfortably in reality. Is that India really cannot claim itself a full democracy? Certainly not in comparison to any other democracy that we enjoy here in the West. It is at times often referred to. It's more like a banana republic than a democracy at times, James.
Absolutely. And it's very interesting because you get, if you pay attention to social media, some of the feeds out there would have, the world thinking that, Canada is one of the most restrictive, oppressed and government overreach. And oh my gosh, Canada's horrible. And yet, if you look at the reality of it, the freedom is still there. And regardless as to the people who scream the loudest, getting the attention online, this shows, a bit more reality of it. Do we have our issues? Absolutely. Sure we do. Any nation does. But at the end of the day, it's not nearly as bad as what some would have others believe. And I mean, one of the biggest things when I went to Ukraine that really embarrassed me was I'm talking to soldiers who are fighting for their freedom, for their country, for their lives and their future and their culture, everything. And one of the soldiers came up and he asked me if everything was okay in Canada and if Canada's going to be okay because he heard about trucker convoys. And I just shook my head. I was so embarrassed thinking, this is what the world is hearing about Canada. This small but vocal group of idiots that are at the parliament. So yeah, it was, it just goes to show what travels across the, across the world. It floats across the oceans or gets over the mountains, Angus.
Yeah, it's all relative, of course. Is at least we have the ability to hold our governments to account. We have, at least so far, the ability to take to the streets and protest freely. I can criticise and call my own Prime Minister a completely useless piece of what's it. And hopefully, the police are not going to be knocking on my door. But you do that in India, which, again, is supposed to be an equivalent democracy. Of course, you can't do that. I can set up a website. We can even broadcast this. Now, is this channel broadcastable in India? Of course it isn't. So again, it's all the evidence is there. If anybody needs it, India is not a democracy. A democratic government is not afraid of being held to account. A democratic government will actually invite criticism. It will. That's essentially what democracy is about. Is you are accountable to your people. The Indian government certainly is not, and that is to the great tragedy of the Indian people. So, anyway, James, let's move on because we've got lots to get through. I've got another couple of stories I want to just rush through, make sure we get everything squeezed in today. And I'm just going to jump back to the UK, and I'm just going to highlight this is a precursor to the podcast I'm going to do this week. Hopefully, I'm going to be talking later this week to Deepa Singh. He's one of the co-founders of Sikh Youth UK. And Sikh Youth UK have done really sterling work. Deepa particularly and his sister have been very active for the community here in the UK, and they've done a huge amount of selfless service, Seva, for the community across many issues. And as a result, he's become, sadly, a target himself. I talk about Western democracies. He himself has basically become a target of the British state, who've done their absolute level best to try and close him down, as indeed anybody who represents the Khalistan movement and tries to highlight Sikh issues like particularly Jagtar Singh Johal, etc. I mean, basically, to put it quite bluntly, Deepa and his organisation have been a thorn in the side of the British state, and I mean that as a compliment, because again, it's all about holding our governments to account. And anyway, I'm going for a slight tangent here, but anyway, that's to give you a bit of context of Sikh Youth UK. But as I say, they have been doing a lot of sterling work in terms of the community. And as I've reported in recent times, right across the diaspora, but particularly here in the UK, we've witnessed some terrible increases in hate crimes against the Sikh community. It's not just Sikh communities, against the Muslim community and our minority communities, but of course the Sikh community has become collateral damage in this. And now, on the whole, our Sikh community here in the UK is viewed with very favourably. You only need to look across social media. Anytime there's a story about Sikhs, you see British white people, for want of a better description, wading in and actually always making really positive comments. We love the Sikhs, they're great, powerful people. My dad served with them in the army, or my grandfather served with them in Burma, etc., as indeed my own did. So you'll always see really positive comments and supportive comments about the Sikh community. But sadly, as I say, they have become collateral damage in this war that seems to be growing, this divisive social war that's happening, that's been, as I say, root causes of mass immigration, uncontrolled immigration. And many people in the UK are turning on our resident indigenous ethnic communities to try and vent their anger. And of course, the Sikh community has become, sadly, a target of this, rather stupidly. And we've reported on 2 rapes recently of Sikh women perpetrated by idiotic, criminal, right-wing extremists that were clearly hate crimes. But there have been lower level hate crimes, whether it's just simple attacks in the streets. We had the taxi drivers attacked by some young right-wing thugs in Birmingham. So as a result, as I say, this is all precursor to Sikh Youth UK's initiative. Now, let me just show up their. Here we go. There, right. This is their. They just released. Deep has just released a statement on behalf of the organisation. I'll just quickly go through this, and this is a precursor to a discussion that I will have with Deepa later in the week. Is the podcast this week will be with Deepa Singh. And we will talk about the work that he's been doing recently, particularly to help protect the Sikh community. And as he said, they've launched a nationwide Sikh safety campaign to provide actual support on the ground, practical support, and a bit of reassurance and awareness during a time when many in our community are feeling particularly vulnerable. Now, a big part of this initiative, and they get this, they've issued 20,000 rape alarms. Well, they call them personal safety alarms, basically rape alarms. So there's a huge number of rape alarms have been handed out to the cause, to the Sikh ladies in our community, basically to protect them. If they are ever attacked, they can press the buttons on these alarms. And if you've ever heard one, they are deeply piercing, they're terrifying, the great bit of kit. And every woman actually, particularly in the community, should carry one of these, particularly if they're now vulnerable. So anyway, a huge amount have been issued out for free to our ladies in the community. And it does actually give them at least something. Now, of course, physically, they can't fight back against these extremists, but they can, once, if you press one of these rape alarms, they not just scare the bejesus out of the rapists, they also alert anybody within about 100 square miles that something's going on. So these are the really effective bit of kit. So well done for that initiative. Now, alongside the alarms, they've been also raising awareness by distributing leaflets, delivering educational seminars, of course, particularly around the Midlands, where our larger diaspora communities reside. They've been holding these seminars and get-togethers, again, just to highlight the issues, actually encourage the community to report these hate crimes, again, however low level, because, again, it's really important that these crimes are actually reported. And as he says, these sessions help the community understand the realities of the current climate. I'm sure they're pretty much aware of it anyway, but ultimately it just help raise awareness. And the campaign is supported by dedicated volunteers across the regions, whether it's London, Southall, particular regions, or the Midlands, again, where our larger diaspora communities are. But what's also very interesting, and I'm just going to a quick side issue here, we don't really have time to talk about this. When, for example, there have been all sorts of petitions. In the UK, we have the ability to launch a petition, and on the petition website, it has a map of where the supporters sign from. And it's always fascinated me, particularly with Sikh issues, where I know that Sikhs primarily have been voting on these petitions, is that you can see around the UK where our Sikh diaspora is, and they are literally all over it, even up in the Orkney Islands. In fact, if you're up in the Orkneys or the Shetlands, that's our very far north of Scotland, let us know. Send us a comment, because I'd do love to know where our British audience, because they are literally all over the UK. It's amazing. Of course, we have these large concentrations in the Midlands and in London, but we have Sikhs, whether it's in Glasgow or in the southwest, the far southwestern peninsula. The diaspora is huge. So anyway, let us know where you are, just as a side issue. So anyway, but as I say, the campaign has been supported by lots of local organisations, Gurdwaras, Sevadars. Their involvement is helping build a structured, on-the-ground network that can respond to local needs. So this is really important, that this network is established, because, of course, it's not just about individuals going out and doing their selfless service, because as an individual, there's only so much you can do. But it's when the networks actually combine, coordinate and communicate, they end up being so much more effective. So as Sikh Youth UK say, as the campaign grows, more alarms will be distributed to Gurdwaras across the organisations. Further seminars, there's a whole set of seminars planned across the UK. And our collective efforts, important word there, collective efforts rooted in savour and solidarity, are strengthening the well-being and confidence of Sikhs throughout the country. So there you go, James. That's very obviously very UK-centric, but again, it just highlights how the community is always very tight-knit. It always, in times of trouble, in times of threat, it always unites very cohesively. And these initiatives are always launched very quickly and always very effective, again, because the community is so tight-knit, and it always comes together anytime that any member of the community is threatened or we have these dreadful incidents. They're always very quick to unite, to support. I mean, the reward was up to £20,000 here in the UK, for example, to capture that rapist, as a simple example. So again, it just exemplifies how cohesive the community is, and long may that continue.
Yeah, and we see that in a lot of smaller communities in Canada, and I think that we are losing a lot of that sense of community and neighbors in the bigger cities. And it's a shame because, as you said, Angus, it is all about supporting each other in those times of trouble. But it also goes a long way to showing the other side, these rapists, these dirtbags that are out there causing these horrific hate crimes. It shows them that it doesn't matter what race people are. The community as a whole is going to come together, and they are going to demand that you are held accountable, and that the message is out that this is not acceptable in our communities. And I think that's where a lot of the big metropolis or metropolitan cities are losing that edge, Angus.
Indeed. So anyway, but as I say, do keep an eye out for my podcast with Deepa Singh later this week if you want to know more about what's going on here in the UK with that particular initiative. Right, I'm just going to wrap up now. Here, I'm just going to show, as I speak, I'm just going to show some pictures that came out of Chandigarh. I'm going to talk about the Punjab University protests. Yes, they have not gone away, quite the opposite. They are still mounting in power and effectiveness. So the latest is from Chandigarh, is that the Punjab University Bachao Morcha, that's basically the protest, the march, makes a big announcement. The Morcha will shut down the university administration block tomorrow, that's Tuesday and Wednesday the 19th, that's the 18th and 19th, and boycott examinations that are planned. Now on the 20th, I think that's Thursday, the Morcha has called a joint meeting of both of farmers unions, students unions and employees unions. So again, you can start to see how all these sort of activist movements and the unions representing obviously the farmers and employees, not just students, they're all now joining in support in this protest. So they're building up, we talk about network, well this network of activism is joining forces, and as a result of that is turning the whole thing into something a lot more powerful. Now the Morcha says the meeting may also, not confirmed yet, but it may also announce to Gerau, and I'll come on to that word, the Punjab governor's residence if needed. Now a Gerau is basically, it's a blockade, it's a protest designed to prevent somebody or people from going to work. So ultimately they are saying that they're looking to announce a Gerau against the governor of Punjab, his own residence. In other words, they're going to blockade him in his own house. So again, if they want to make sure that the message is heard, that certainly will do it. So there you go, I'm just going to turn that down so it's quite loud. But anyway, those pictures from Chandigarh. But as I said, James, this protest is certainly not going away. And just to remind people, obviously, about the protest, it is a pushback against Indian state control, by that read, RSS control of one of the last independent universities in India, of course, Punjab. Punjab University represents so much about the culture and the heritage of the Punjab, particularly, of course, the Sikh people, and the Indian state is trying, like it did with the SGPC, like it did with the Shiromani Akali Dal, is trying to take full control, infiltrate the RSS, and make sure that anything that can potentially be a threat to the Brahmanical control of India is closed down and buried. So, again, this protest represents more than just simple Punjab University. It represents a much, much bigger story, James.
Absolutely. And tomorrow night, Angus, I'll be covering a bit of a different protest that actually made me laugh. And you're going to love it tomorrow night. So make sure you tune in to watch tomorrow's show. And it's got to do with some of the protests. And I'm getting video feeds from people on my Facebook that are sending me direct feed or direct footage. So you're going to love this. And I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but you'll want to catch that tomorrow on the show.
Great stuff. We do look forward to that one, James. Okay, let's move on now. And let's move on onto our comments column. Loads of comments. Thank you to our wonderful audience, as always, for all your comments. And we'll start off today with one of our regulars, Hat B. Thank you, Hat B, for your comments. India has arrested, this is quite concerning, India has arrested over 1,500 Muslims in recent times, and in Ludhiana particularly. They're arresting people from Punjab too. This is only the Indian government's excuse to arrest anyone they want. Seems like RAW, the Research and Analysis Wing, has been busy planning and plotting these blasts as Hindutva's next step to openly attack Muslims in India. And Indian media currently are aggressively lying about Muslims, just as they did just before Operation Blue Star. So the whole comment really is just pointing to the fact that there's something's brewing. Clearly, it's building up a bit of a crescendo. We've had a mass arrest of Muslims. The media are jumping, the Godi media are jumping on the bandwagon, inciting the mobs again against the minorities, in this case the Muslims. And again, we had the Delhi blast just a few days ago. Is something bigger going on here, James?
Yeah, and we've got to look at the fact that they are blaming the Delhi blasts on the anti-nationalists, they're saying. So they're leaving that window open to a point that as their narrative is going to change or maybe just take shape as they plan it, who are they going to start putting that blame on for the bomb blasts there? They've already hinted at certain groups, but they haven't directly called out and pinpointed one and really said this is it, period. So again, this is interesting to look at, because are they waiting and going to just brush it off as they normally do to use these events, and just whether these individuals may or may not have been involved, say, well, that's good enough for us because it gives us an excuse to go in and put people in prison, or to beat them down, or take them to the torture cells, all of that sort of thing, Angus. So we'll watch and see how this continues.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting in the context of Indian politics at the moment is that the BJP, they're now on their third term in power, but they only won power in last year's elections. Only just. They a lot of support. They lost a lot of support. They had to, again, form a much bigger coalition that's basically diluted their power to some degree to essentially stay in power. Now, as a result, and we do know that authoritarian regimes, when they start to lose grip on power, they become even more authoritarian. They become a little bit more brutal in their desperation to try and cling on to power. So one wonders, and we think about the Pahalgam attacks recently, of course, the Delhi blast, etc. Do we think that the Indian state is because it realised, when I say the Indian state, it's this Brahmanical ruling elite and the RSS, because they feel that they are losing a grip on India and Indian politics. Maybe they are resorting to increasingly desperate measures. So who knows? It's, as I say, it's interesting with what's going on in the bigger political scene in India. And Bobby Singh's comment, it's the beginning of the end of RSS. I don't know. The RSS has been around for a very long time. Its roots, really, I think, if memory serves, was the late 19th century, and it really came to prominence in the early part of the 20th century up into the 1930s. And it with its sort of formation of the whole Hindutva ideology and this idea of a Hindu Rashtra. The RSS has been around for a very long time, and certainly manifested itself politically with the BJP. But is it really the beginning of the end? I don't know. It's a very big thing to claim. We certainly obviously hope so. We're doing our little bit from our little corner here in the West to try and bring that about. But I don't know. As I say, it's a very, very powerful organisation, James.
Absolutely. And I mean, the RSS is like a little chameleon. They adapt, they change to their environment, and they have survival. And I mean, look at how they've adapted to the new technology of today with AI, or even just going back, a couple of decades with the advancement of the internet. So they do know how to pivot and move as they need to keep themselves relevant to the government at hand.
That's a very good point. Of course, the Hindutva forces, the RSS, have this huge army of online bots. They pay people just to literally spend every day just going online spreading pro RSS propaganda and then hatred against particularly the Sikh community amongst many others. So. Harjeet Rosha, here you go, Joe. This is I love this comment. I'm watching today after quite some time. James has a big screen behind him, which gives us a 3D effect. Looks like he is leading the whole world. You look like Dr. Evil there, James. Harjeet Rosha is very happy for you.
$1 billion. So I guess that was more Mike Myers, but hey, it's all good.
Absolutely. But then Harjeet talks about the trucking story, which of course is serious. It is sad to see what's going on there, as you say. You make the interesting point. If these accidents hadn't been Sikhs, if they'd been just white people, let's say, would there have been such a backlash? Would it have been such a big story? No, I think you're absolutely right. I think the fact that they were, sadly, they were illegal immigrants and they were Sikhs, the backlash has been huge. It's just fed ammunition. It's gifted ammunition to the right-wing extremists to start turning on, well, not just Sikhs, but the minority populations in the US as well. And as you rightly say, I mean, ultimately these incidents were accidents. Now, as I said when we talked about them, almost every accident is preventable in hindsight. But ultimately, yes, accidents do happen. We are all human beings. We are all flawed. We all make mistakes. Is it right, really, just to essentially turn on the whole community from essentially what was an accident, James?
Absolutely. And let's not forget that you've got Caucasians out there drinking and driving and causing lethal results. You have Asian people doing the same. You have, Russian. We are a melting pot in North America of different ethnicities. And to go after one because of the actions of one or a few is just asinine. It goes against the very principles of everything that we've been taught and everything that we stand for. And to see this happening is just disgusting, because if you look at the people who are responsible for a minimum of 20% of our supply chain to get things, and I say ours, meaning the Western world overall. They are working day and night away from their families, missing birthdays, missing holidays, missing all of these things to make sure that we've got groceries on our shelves, to make sure that there are car parts for our repairs, to make sure that there's medicine in the pharmacy when we're sick, and to take it out on every person because of the actions of a few is really disappointing and saddening, Angus.
Yeah, and it always makes me chuckle when I hear right-wing extremists in the US talking about immigration, and always I chuckle because you're all immigrants. The whole of North America essentially are immigrants. It really undermines the credibility of many of their arguments. So anyway, Ripperji, this is an interesting one. This is about my podcast with Dr. Grewal. We talked about Punjab University. Dr. Grewal himself, he's a medical doctor, but he's also an alumni. He was at Punjab University himself, so he could speak very knowledgeably about the university and what was going on. So Ripperji says, Waheguru Guruji bless Ashmeet Singh, bold, articulate and intelligent young Sikh leader. Yes, of course, this Ashmeet Singh has been one of the standout characters, a young man who's had the courage to stand up and really help rally the protests, and has become a focal point for these protests. And so many people online right across the diaspora and indeed in India said, please just be careful, because we do know what the Indian state's capable of. His life literally is in danger for having the courage to stand up in a situation like this. But certainly this comment pays tribute to this young lad, and in fact, even as Dr. Grewal said in the podcast, this young boy has potentially a huge future, because clearly he is, and in fact he even referred to the gentleman standing behind me, is he a future Bhindranwale? Who knows, James?
Absolutely, and it's great to see people taking that interest in that leadership role, even in the face of adversity and putting themselves at risk. So again, it just shows that the true passion from within can grow anywhere, and when it's harnessed, it can be a very powerful source of change.
Yeah, and the next two comments, I'm really pleased these two comments came up, actually. TC, one of our regulars, thanks TC for your comment. Of course, you're saying the whole battle is really to preserve Sikhi-centred ideology, Sikhi sovereignty, etc., etc. But actually, this other person came back and said, Mayan said, look, Punjab University, it's not just about Sikhi, it's about Punjab as a whole, Punjab. Punjab have other people other than Sikhs too. And I think this actually is an absolutely right reminder. Look, actually, it isn't just about Sikhi, although, of course, that is a huge part of this. It is about Punjab as a state. It is about the individuality as Punjab as a state. And Punjab, although primarily is as I say, demographically is a majority Sikh state, it also has Hindus, Christians, it has people from all sorts of different backgrounds and religions. And again, we mustn't forget the whole foundations of what Khalistan will be about. Although it will be a Sikhi Raj, it will be governed under the principles and morality of Sikhi. It will be welcome to all, and all people will be treated equal. And everybody, whatever your religion or your background, you will have an equal say, an equal voice in the governance and the democratic running of Khalistan. And I think this this comment from mine is a rightly reminder. Look, this isn't just about Sikhi. It's about all of us in the Punjab, and I think we mustn't forget that, James.
Absolutely. And I think that it's also essential to understand that when you are talking specifically about the university, that you have some autonomy there for them to lead a direction to where the course material is going, what the content is, what the curricula is. Because if you are just allowing a government state to basically make those decisions, then again, you are looking at basically, whitewashing anything in the history that they don't like. And it's important that if you are going to learn from the past to prevent it from repeating in the future, that, present day has to have an open university and an open place to really learn that critical thinking. And that can be lost if government takes full control of everything to do with the universities, whether it's in Punjab, whether it's in New Delhi or anywhere else in the world.
And let's not forget that Khalistan can only happen, and it will happen, but it can only happen with the support of other people outside the Sikh community as well. And this is why, for example, this commenter, Mayan 5600, has an absolutely pertinent point here, is that there are others who will benefit outside the Sikh community from Khalistan. Others actually will do much better living in Khalistan than they would in present-day Punjab under the rule, the control of India. That is why Khalistan is so important, because it offers people, not just Sikhs, but it offers all people, whether you're a Hindu or a Christian or whatever, it offers all people a much better, much more equal society, much more benign society to live in, and actually a society where everybody gets an equal voice in amongst that, which unfortunately is not the case in India as it stands. So anyway, thank you for your comments on that one. A final set starts off with your local editor, Howard. What a great comment. Totally agree with this. Not enough subscriptions. Absolutely, James. We do not have enough subscriptions. We do know why, don't we?
Absolutely. As we continue to be shadow banned across Canada, the US, and the UK. And guess who's at the heart of that? Of course, we know the Indutva, the RSS, and others are very active on shadow banning our programs on Satellite TV, not just our show, but Surrender's and others as well. So again, do your part if you can. We ask of you to make sure that you share our content with others, copy the links, share it on other social media and such as well, so that we can increase our subscribers. And let's face it, without our audience, we are nothing. So it's a group effort all the way around, Angus.
And there's no doubt if we were freely available to the Punjab, to India, is that our subscriptions would be at least in the hundreds of thousands, if not more. You look at most Indian channels,
that's right.
They're in the millions, because of course the population of India is 1.4 billion people. So it's not hard to, again, get a million subscribers out of India. But of course we're not viewed there. But if you are watching from India, spread the word. Remind people that you can reach us through VPNs, changing settings, etc. You can reach us. So please do spread the word. And of course, don't forget, we are also talking to a very niche community. Of course, we're not Punjabi speaking here on our side. We are the English side, of course. When you look at the percentage of Sikhs in the community who speak English globally, of course, it's not that large. Tens of millions primarily speak Punjabi. Not that many speak English. So again, we were a little restricted in that respect. So, but ultimately, as James says, help spread the word if we need to get us more subscriptions. Hardeep Bra, you're both doing a great job. Again, as we often say, we can only do this with your support, your loyalty, your comments, etc. So thank you again. I always turn this back on our wonderful audience for your contributions, because it's your contributions and your viewing simply that keeps us going. So thanks for that. And Ranjit Kaur also says, hello, thank you for supporting the Sikh nations. Again, we say it regularly. It's because we're all aligned. Our views are totally aligned with the Sikh views. The whole concept of Khalistan aligns with everything that we believe in as well. It's not a hard thing to do. As I say, it's a pleasure for us more than anything else. Kanwar Bir Singh, please request the producer to add a banner, incredible warrior and human rights protector, next to our picture of Bindra Valiji on the wall behind your desk. Well, I don't know if there'd actually be room to physically sort of squeeze it on there, but I think hopefully most of our audience, if not all our audience, are fully aware of who Bindranwale G is and what he represented and what he achieved and his heroic stand in the Durbar Sahib in 1984. So hopefully, great idea. I don't maybe think it's necessary, but anyway, thanks for the idea. Great suggestion. And Gurbesh Singh signs us off finally with Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ka Fateh, Khalistan Zindabad. James, it's always a final great word. Khalistan Zindabad.
Yeah, exactly. And just a quick mention there about the banner part. The image behind Angus is actually a physical framed image. He's not using a fake background or a virtual background. That is actually his studio background there. So just so you see, maybe that gives you another reason why you can understand that even if you put a banner on there with a name, it's going to be really hard to see on the camera. So.
Indeed. So there you go. So that's it for another day. Thanks so much, Orchard. We must wrap things up now as we've hit the hour mark. Do keep those comments coming in. Thank you for all of you who have contributed. All your comments, we do read them. We do really appreciate them. But don't forget, you can message us directly at message@satluj.com if there's anything you'd like to bring to our attention directly. Do let us know any stories that you think we should be covering or anything that we might have missed, or indeed anything that you'd like to educate us about that you think we need to know. So always much appreciated. But that's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.